Sorry I'm late getting this podcast out, but I've been just overwhelmed with meetings and meetings about meetings and then meetings to discuss those meetings. Seems like we're having a lot more meetings than usual lately. Let's get to it. Welcome. Another fabulous episode of IBF On Demand. I'm your overwhelmed and still passionate host, Eric Wilson. You can find me at eric@ibf.org. That's eric@ibf.org. Thanks for the follows and subscribes. Once again, you can actually follow me on LinkedIn. We have a IBF On Demand YouTube channel, so check that out as well. You can find it through my profile page, or you can put in the little search bar IBF On Demand, because that's the podcast you're watching. Find the LinkedIn page then as well. Follow it, because there's a lot of past content, new content you can only get on that page. So check out IBF On Demand on LinkedIn. And then, of course, here on YouTube, smash that like button and follow us then as well. Or wherever you get your podcast. A lot of people I know, 2/3 of the audience are listening only. You're missing out on this great face, but you get to hear this wonderful voice. So for those that are listening only, please make sure you follow us on whatever platform you are following us on. I do want to thank our sponsor, Arkiva, driving business transformation by solving what others cannot. Thank you, Arkiva, for sponsoring these podcasts. Recently, I was out in the Pacific Northwest in my many travels that I've had lately. It's a great time with a great group of people out there that I had as well. Upcoming, if you want to check out where I'm going to be in the near future, besides some individual corporate trainings. We do a lot of corporate trainings, by the way. Besides some individual corporate trainings, I'm going to be in October at the IBF conference down in Orlando. October 22nd to 24th would be in Orlando. And then international audience, we're going to be in Amsterdam November 20th through the 22nd. Once again, check out all those details at ibf.org. So we have a generational problem, but we also have a current post-COVID problem going on now as well. Because things have changed, partly because of COVID and because of new work environment and generation, and things have fundamentally changed, and we need to start adapting to it. And COVID brought a lot of things that have changed and some things that seem to be the same after COVID now as well. Well, recently, what I said, when I was up in Portland, I had a great discussion with my next guest. And actually, then I wanted to have him on so we can continue that discussions. Most discussions happen over a pint of Guinness or something at a bar, and we have some phenomenal discussions. And I want to bring those discussions back to you, unfortunately, without the Guinness. And he did a personal survey to really talk about how things have changed and how things haven't changed. And we're going to have a little bit of that discussion with you today. So please help me welcome my next guest. Kyle Garcia is over 15 years of experience in demand and supply and S&op. He's the director of supply chain management and strategy at Adidas. He excels at steering teams towards operational efficiency and aligning supply chain strategies with the overall business objectives. He actually sits on the board of directors of Portland ASCM chapter, where I spoke, and recently spoke at the ASCM Connect, where he presented the findings from this recent survey that he conducted that I and many others helped assist him with as well. Please welcome my friend Kyle. So welcome, Kyle. I'm glad I could have you on.
It's a real pleasure, Eric. Thank you for inviting me.
Now, missing the Guinness, we can share between us and have the same conversation. But I'm sure the audience is going to appreciate the conversation, even without the bar atmosphere and the beers.
I think it'll be fine. But I want to call out, I like your stickers here on your laptop, Oregon and Tillamook. So representing the great state of Oregon. So thank you for that. We appreciate it.
Yeah. See, I spend a couple weeks up in the Pacific Northwest, and you already have stickers on my laptop now.
It's infectious.
It's infectious. So I bet you're having rain and it's cold today, though, isn't it?
It's sunny. But that's a pretty good prediction 90% of the time.
Okay. Well, see, things don't change. And speaking
No.
of things not changing, good segue there. You did a great survey. I love it when people, take the initiative, do their own types of work and analysis into things. And you put together a survey. I know you had a lot of people that kind of helped you get the input out, but you did the grunt work of collecting the data, getting the right questions, and putting the data out. And really, the survey was, instead of me telling what the survey, what was the survey? What was the reasoning for your survey?
Let's go back to the beginning. What happened during COVID? I kept having these conversations with all of our supply chain friends, colleagues, experts, and there was a very common theme. These black hole events hit. There's a few of them that hit in a row. Right? The big one is COVID, but we think about the Panama Canal. We think about what was happening at the port of entries. It's a lot of countries. We saw that here in the U.S., especially on the West Coast. Think about what's happening in the Suez Canal and so many other things, right? Ransomware, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It feels like every few months there's like some major event. But what kicked it off really was the COVID pandemic. And every time I was talking to somebody, I heard the same things, which was namely, we're in more meetings than we ever have been before. Our meeting cadence of s&op or IBP or s&op, it's been thrown into chaos, and we've increased the frequency. We've changed the data that we're looking at. We're implementing new tools. There's new people showing up to the conversations. So there was all of these tertiary comments about the changes that was happening to our process. And it got me wondering, okay, here we are now, almost 5 years removed from that. And what I've seen in a lot of the organizations that I've been closely involved with was, is the process has changed. And so, the natural question for me is what's happening everywhere? Is our organizations going back and reverting to this old school, or maybe not old school, but our original intent for these meetings? Or has this been a hybrid evolution? And I knew that, just with the groups that I've been plugged in with, I have the fortunate situation to have a lot of really good friends on LinkedIn that are experts in s&op and s&op and IBP. I just started asking them some questions, and then it turned into this, okay, I've really got to do this survey. And so I asked these 7 questions that were really trying to unlock what happened, where did companies go from then till now, what is the technology, how are they analyzing their current state, are they talking about going back, have they already started to transition back? And there was so many great nuggets that I'm excited to kind of share and talk about. But that's where it came from.
And I loved it. It's great, and that's where you reached out, and we had great conversations about it as well. And I think one of the first questions you had was talking about the disruptions of the process, things that have changed. And I think similar to IBF research, you found the same thing. People are going to more of these like war room type mentalities and weekly or daily type of meetings to try to overcome the chaos and uncertainty they were seeing. I think that's one of the first things that really you discovered in your survey. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, you're spot on. So there was 5 major takeaways. So I'll talk through them, spend a minute to each point. But there was 5 major takeaways. First, we had 65 people respond, which blew my mind because I didn't even realize I had 65 friends. So to be able to, I have to admit, I was grateful for you to, kind of sharing this amongst your great LinkedIn profile. We had a lot of folks that reached out and filled it out that way. But we got all of these experts' opinions, and I started going through and consolidating all of their comments, and there was 5 major things. The first thing that really stood out was that the adjustment to involve executives and senior leadership in a new way. And that's one of the building blocks of a good S&OP process, right? And for the remainder of this call, I'll just say S&OP, but you please note, we're talking about all of those SIOP, IBP, but one of the fundamentals is you have to have that top-down support. That executive level support has to be there. It legitimizes our process, and it helps us have teeth and when we have to make decisions. So the good thing, right, is that these executives recognize that they needed to be involved. This also came with a little bit of we can say an opportunity that a lot of folks expressed that while the senior leadership and executives were starting to show up in a new way, a lot of times they were overriding the process. So one hand, it's really good that they're there, but the second part is that we as professionals have to continue to coach them, that and help them put the right facts in front of them so that they're making the right decision. Because at the moment, there's still a little bit of that hangover where you're having these executives say, buy to this sales plan, or we're understocked, let's just buy. We're overstocked, cut all buying. So there's still a opportunity there, but that's why we as professionals or even have our jobs, is we can help balance that and bring a better balanced perspective.
We've seen a lot of, I said, that war room mentality. The executives come into the weekly executional type of meetings during COVID is what we saw as well. And unfortunately, some of them never left those meetings. They got a taste for information and they got drunk on it, and it's an addiction to them now, and they keep coming back to these weekly meetings. And you're exactly right. We have to politely kick them out of those to be able to start doing what we do well, and they can do what they can start being a little more strategic again. And we really need, and that's part of not only their role to understand that, but our role to help coach them in that. I love what you said there, because that is something we do need to kind of create, that the roles and responsibilities of who needs to be in the meetings. And I think one of the takeaways that you're pretty much saying.
100%. And we always do that in a positive way, right? Now we're going to focus on bringing this and making it really tactical and lower level, but we also have to counterbalance that by saying, but this is when we're going to bring you to the table during this executive review and during this S&op. So we balance it, help them to, like you said, focus on the strategy and long-term initiatives.
So, some great points. So what was some of the second points you had then on that?
Yeah, so then the second thing is that we saw that a lot of organizations used this opportunity to reset and go through their digital transformation. Now, admittedly, like we're a lot of companies were already on that journey, and a lot of companies were trying to understand how they can use big data and digest it and pull it into their end-to-end supply chain. This just really kickstarted it. So what was called out is that a lot of companies said that there was a refocus and an acceleration on the data that was being pulled into their S&op process, with the aim to try to create some agility. So whether it be a market indicator or a retailer insight or consumer insight, trying to pull this data in so that they can make better decisions upstream. And that's music to our ears. We want to do that. We want to see that. So there's two sides to this. That was definitely this thought process of moving towards digital, but a lot of people noted that they actually haven't quite unlocked that yet. So they're on this journey still, and it's absolutely, the vast majority of organizations are still really in that premature state of getting this insight, but not really knowing how to yet plug that into something that's meaningful to the process.
And I would agree with that one as far as some IBF research doing parallel to this one, kind of to corroborate exactly what you're saying. When we saw prior to COVID, 20-some% of the companies were using some external data in their forecasting process. COVID hit, almost 2/3 of the companies went to some external data point because they didn't trust what data they had to try to figure out what the heck was going on. And as things, you talk about the positive changes there, as things, positively change because of COVID, unfortunately, some things go back to normal. And this is one where we saw companies that didn't know how to integrate the data or using descriptive analytics, things that just told them what was happening then. A lot of companies went to, as far as COVID infection rates and things that no longer are applicable today. So now we're seeing back to 20-some% of the companies are using external data. So unfortunately, we kind of seen that hype cycle go down to the trough of despair now when it comes to data. But I'm sure people have had an introduction. I am confident we're going to start seeing an exponential growth of external data sources being integrated into planning going forward. Confident of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The third thing was that people readjusted their approach to work it outside of silos in new ways. Many people focused that there was a upstream impact to supplier relationships and the way that they managed their inventory at suppliers, the way that they bought and held their inventory. That was kind of shocking. I didn't expect to see so much of that, but there was so many comments about how they really partnered in a better way, in a more meaningful way with their suppliers. Also, it highlighted risk that, when there was a single source supplier, a lot of people called out that this pushed them into the space where they recognized that they needed to have multiple suppliers for some products, because that was a lot of the pain and pinch points. So this is the stuff that we know, right? We know it, but it kind of becomes uncovered when you hit a pressure point like we've seen. 4 is robust and flexible strategies. So a little bit of kind of what I talked about now, but this was more, a lot of folks were commenting that they hadn't used, that they had only used a unit-based S&OP process, and that they were transitioning to a blended model using, IBP and S&OP, so that there's this units and dollars coming together, and then understanding the gap. Others talked about how they leverage their finance partners to sign off or validate their forecast. Now, the truth is too that some said that they moved from more of a strategic focus to a tactical focus, and they weren't necessarily calling that out as a good thing. So they were hoping that they started to pull back out and had more of those longer term strategic conversations. So what I imagine that a lot of those organizations were doing was focusing on the next like 3 or 4 months, instead of holding true to the cadence. Others called out that they had started implementing S&OE because they recognized that there's a big gap there between S&OP and S&OE, and that strategic versus tactical horizons.
Yep, that's in our S&OP cycle. S&OE finally shows up as one of the majority of the mature organizations are now doing an S&OE process, thanks to COVID.
Thanks to COVID,
Yeah.
So it's a blend, right? So organizations definitely recognize that they needed to make some adjustments. But what does that mean for us, right? For us today, we want to pause as professionals and look back and say, okay, if we were back here in 2018 and we're here today, what did we learn that worked really well? What practices do we want to start to go back to, and firm up? Because we can get caught in just doing our day-to-days, but this is a good moment to pause, reflect, look back, and change.
Now, what was number 5 then? Did we hit 5?
Number 5 was structured environment. So this is where we are looking at the data and the cleansing of data. So earlier we talked about digital transformation and how that's helping make decisions, but the structure of data is where companies are still struggling.
Now, those were 5 really good insights that came from your survey, and I said it's great what you did and putting all that in together. But the thing that was most interesting to me was actually what you led with in this podcast, which was, we are being overwhelmed by meetings now. And that really was something that came out of COVID as well. People started putting meetings on top of meetings in the new virtual environment to keep people connected. You had to meet more. So we created all these virtual meetings, these series of meetings. Everybody has meetings galore during COVID. We haven't seen those go away yet. And I think that's something you kind of uncovered as well.
Yeah, so now admittedly I did do this presentation at a conference, and there was about 125 people there, and I just did a show of hands, and I said, how many of you are spending more time in meetings? How many of you are spending less time in meetings? And how many are about the same? So less.
Can I vote on that one?
Yeah, of course. I've got 126
more.
Two people in that audience said that they were spending less time. And I did talk to them afterwards because I was really curious. And I said, okay, how are you doing this? And it was really interesting. They started leveraging S&OE, and they broke that off. So they were no longer joining S&OE. They were in demand planning, and they were just doing the S&OP and handing it over to supply chain to execute. So that was cool. And they also had some new tools and technology. So they were able to genuinely scale back. But by and large, about 100 people said more. A few said the same, but it was pretty crystal clear that your point is spot on. We're spending more time than ever. Now, for us, this is also something that a torch we have to carry, especially if you're a leader or you're leading teams. How do you protect your team's times? They're not going to be as effective analyzing and digging out those gold gems and nuggets if your team is spending more time in meetings. So, encouraging people to say no, be really crystal clear with your agenda, talk about organizationally, what is the reset, and bring in your peers, bring in those cross-functional partners. What does the reset look like so we can be more effective and efficient in our roles? That's how we do that.
Yeah. And if I were to add to something on that, if you're going to
Yeah.
have a meeting, especially if it's a recurring meeting, you should probably have some kind of RACI or DACI with it. You should define who needs to be accountable or decision maker, for who's steering it, who's consulted, who's informed, and not have these drop-ins of people who coming in the meetings that don't need to be in these meetings. And we see that a lot as well.
Yep, absolutely, totally.
The other thing you mentioned that was kind of interesting in that was you mentioned the two people out of the 125 that were able to lessen, they created more structure. So is there a kind of a lesson of there's efficiency creates less, almost the lean principles in meeting? Is that what I'm kind of hearing?
I think if you map your decision process, then I think you can, right? But there's an inverse of that. If you don't understand that decision process, and like you called out the DACI and the RACI, if you don't have that crystal clear, what could happen is that you launch s&op, and then you create s&OE, and then you have those same people showing up to those meetings. And you could have the opposite effect, right? So be really crystal clear. Are we talking about the liquid, slushy, frozen? Like, what's the period of time that we're talking about? Bring those people in that need to be there. Have a crystal clear deliverable handoff of what happens from s&op to s&OE, and just have that aligned. What happens between pre-s&op and s&op? So again, just aligning that and mapping your decisions through your environment, your organization. That's the unlocks. That's how we do it.
Okay, I got 3 more rapid fire quick questions for you.
Yeah,
then.
fire.
Meetings are a problem. Obviously, 100 people raised their hand. Meetings are the problem. That's the kind of the impetus of this podcast is talking about the meetings. So you're a director there at Adidas. You manage people, you manage processes, some strategy. What are your responsibility to minimize the meetings? Question 1.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Making sure that the right people are there to have that conversation, and who isn't there and doesn't need to be there, it's okay to put them as optional and tell them, like, you're always welcome to be and join and be part of this conversation. But if you don't have to be, we understand that you have deliverables that you can focus on. So first is being clear about who's doing what by when, and you do that through agenda, building that RACI or your DACI.
Okay, second question. Now put on the hat of that person I met at that, the person who just started not too long ago at Adidas, the practitioner who's in being pulled into every single meeting because they have a piece of information to give here and a piece of information to give there, and they don't have time to do their job. How do they speak up and be able to change their environment to really start talking to their bosses and saying, hey, let's define what we're doing?
Yeah, I would encourage that person to first pause and understand what's being asked of them and have clear expectations from their leader. Once you put that template across all of the conversations, it's going to crystallize where you need to be and where you need to spend your time. So encourage them to have really clear communications and be open with their manager about what they can and can't do and where they're struggling. And what does that look like? Bring it to your leader and say, I have these 2 meetings. I have a lot of valuable insight. Which one of these do you recommend I prioritize? How can I still provide this insight without being there in person? So helping bring somebody, specifically your leader, in on that journey is how you're going to be able to get that clarity. And then you won't feel that compromise that you have to just continue giving of yourself and pour out more than you can.
Okay. Last question. You did a great survey, some great analysis. You've talked to a lot of, people about what they're doing. You personally, what do you think, the biggest takeaway from your survey that still needs to change post-COVID, or things that need to go back to, things that we did that wasn't quite right? So what's the biggest kind of lesson learned we can take away from your survey and COVID?
I think regardless of what industry or organization you are, pausing for a moment and having this conversation with your leaders and with your cross-functional partners to say, things changed. Like, this is not the same game that it was 5 years ago. Understanding what's working for them And then being able to say, we're coming up on 2025, great opportunity for us to challenge the status quo and ask what's working. So that's number one, is bring people on that journey. The second part of that is the technology piece. Are you still using the same signals, demand signals and demand sensing that you did 6 years ago? Maybe that's okay, but maybe it's not. So again, bring in your data analysts and your data scientists and say, let's huddle. We've been doing this process using this data. Is it right? We have 2 years where maybe it's a black hole event. Have we scrubbed this? Do we need to scrub it? What is our plan going forward? So it's really about being aware and then having conversations with others.
Great. Well, fantastic. So great having you on. It was a wonderful conversation. I'm sure the audience is going to love it as well. So
awesome.
And I'll see you next time I'm out in your area, probably.
I'll get you some more stickers for your laptop.
All right. Thank you. Talk to you soon. Bye. We need to look honestly and objectively at the meetings we are in and have every day, and truly look at them and say, are they adding any value? Because I think we all know what the answer is. So there's a lot of meetings that don't add value. So we need to start looking at those. Process mapping has been used by many companies, project management. It really helps identify bottlenecks and provide visibility into how processes are carried out. Let's use some of that same logic on meetings now as well. Decision mapping essentially makes the decision-making process visible and illustrates how and who and when decisions are made. It's a real simple process that takes a lot of the same concepts and maps out the decisions that are made, and then looks at why and who and if those decisions are being made properly. So what you really want to do is go through a structured process that really maps out the decisions that are made weekly, monthly, and annually. Ultimately, what you can do is you can look at from a process standpoint, whether it be a FP&A process, S&op, whether it be a product lifecycle, stage and gate process. You can look at it from a process standpoint and then look at decisions that are made within those processes. Or you can look at it from a matrix of functional and then look at process decisions being made as well. Decisions are made all the time in business. And different people are making the decisions at different times with different inputs and for different reasons. This is a way to formalize, a way to take those and look at what decisions are made weekly, what decisions are consistently made monthly, and what decisions are consistently made maybe even on quarterly or annually. After you have this matrix, now you can refine that list. Taking, once again, some project management types of acronyms, we're going to use SIPOC or COPUS, depending on what you're looking at. So this is going to be your supplier, your input, your process, your output, and your customer. The process is the decision. So we already have that defined. This is the decision going to be made. Now, the other two sides of that is who's providing the input for that, and then who are you providing what's this purpose of this decision? What's the end use of this decision being made? That becomes your SIPOC. That becomes your supplier, the input, the person, or what is making the input into your process. Could be a system, could be data, could be a person. What is that input necessary for you to make that decision? And then what is the output? And then why are you making it, or who is the end user? Who's the internal customer? That becomes your SIPOC, or your process. You're now identifying the who's, the inputs, the whys of decisions that you've already identified that are made on a regular basis by some process or some individual. From here, something remarkable is going to happen. You can now easily start to group some of these decisions together, either by inputs, they're all using the similar inputs, or by people, these people are making the similar, or functions making similar types of decisions at similar time horizons. Start grouping them together, and then final step in this process is strategize and prioritize. You're going to find some that you may be having meetings, duplicate meetings, you can be able to start to combine. You may be able to find some that you really can accomplish this without a meeting. or you can improve the decision and bring the right people into the meetings so you can have more productive time and then find you don't need as much time in the same meetings. Well, that's a wrap. I'm going to go jump on another call. Sorry, I have a hard stop at the top of the hour. I got to get off here. My name is Eric. You can find me at eric@ibf.org. That's eric@ibf.org. Thanks, Arkiva, for driving business transformation by solving what others cannot. Thank you, Arkiva, for being a fabulous sponsor. Once again, I do have a book that all about collaboration. It's had an amazing adoption and selling like crazy, so please check out the practical guide for sales and operations planning, s&op IBP. Check that out at ibf.org or on Amazon. Remember, we're going to be in Orlando for an IBF conference October 22nd and 24th, and then we're going to be in Amsterdam November 20th through the 26th and 22nd. We're going to be in Amsterdam, so check out those two conferences at ibf.org. And remember, as going in and out of all these meetings, don't forget, wash your hands.